Don't be alarmed, my dear Miss Pross. I arrived at Mr. Lorry's to his surprise yesterday evening. We agreed that I would not present myself elsewhere until all was well, or unless I could be useful. I present myself here to beg a little talk with your brother. I wish you had a better employed brother than Mr. Barsad. I wish for your sake Mr. Barsad was not the sheep of the prisons. Sheep was a cant word of the time for a spy under the jailers. The spy, who was pale, turned paler, and asked him how he dared. So here we find out what John Barsad Solomon, we find out what he is, what type of official he is. He is a spy for the Republic, or for the revolutionaries, inside of the prisons. Picking up with, I'll tell you. I'll tell you, said Sidney. I lighted on you, Mr. Barsad, coming out of the prison of the conciergerie while I was contemplating the walls an hour or more ago. You have a face to be remembered, and I remember faces well. Made curious by seeing you in that connection, and having a reason to which you are no stranger, for associating you with the misfortunes of a friend now very unfortunate. I walked in your direction. I walked into the wine shop here, close after you, and sat near you. I had no difficulty in deducing from your unreserved conversation, and the rumor openly going about among your admirers, the nature of your calling, and gradually what I had done at random seemed to shape itself into a purpose, Mr. Barsad. What purpose? The spy asked. It would be troublesome and might be dangerous to explain it in the street. Could you favor me in confidence with some minutes of your company, at the office of Tellson's Bank, for instance? Under a threat? Oh, did I say that? Then why should I go there? Really, Mr. Barsad, I can't say if you can't. Do you mean that you won't say, sir? The spy irresolutely asked. You apprehend me very clearly, Mr. Barsad. I won't. So here, Sidney Carton is very slyly threatening John Barsad. He's saying, I need you to come, and I need you to come talk to me. And if you don't, I'm not going to say what I'm going to do. I'm not going to claim that I'm going to do anything to you, but I'm not going to say that I'm not either. That's basically Carton's way of getting him there. Picking up with Carton's negligent. Carton's negligent recklessness of manner came powerfully in aid of his quickness and skill in such business as he had in his secret mind, and with such a man as he had to do with. His practiced eye even saw it, and made the most of it. Now I told you so, said the spy, casting a reproachful look at his sister. If any trouble comes of this, it's your doing. Come, come, Mr. Barsad, exclaimed Sidney. Don't be ungrateful. But for my great respect for your sister, I might not have led up so pleasantly to a little proposal that I wish to make for our mutual satisfaction. Do you go with me to the bank? I'll hear what you have to say. Yes, I'll go with you. I propose that we first conduct your sister safely to the corner of her own street. Let me take your arm, Miss Pross. This is not a good city at this time for you to be out in unprotected, and as your escort knows Mr. Barsad, I will invite him to Mr. Lorry with us. Are we ready? Come in. Miss Pross recalled soon afterwards, and to the end of her life remembered, that as she pressed her hand on Sidney's arm and looked up in his face, imploring him to do no harm to Solomon, there was a braced purpose in the arm, and a kind of inspiration in the eyes which not only contradicted his light manner, but changed and raised the man. She was too much occupied then with fears for the brother who so little deserved her affection, and with Sidney's friendly reassurances adequately to heed what she observed. So here Pross is recognizing that some change has occurred with Sidney Carton. There is something that kind of has lifted him out of that desolate, kind of negative characteristic that we've seen so much from him. He's somehow lifted out of that. He has become a better man, but she doesn't notice it until much later on. Picking up what they left her at the corner of the street, and Carton led the way to Mr. Lorry's, which was within a few minutes' walk. John Barsad, or Solomon Pross, walked at his side. Mr. Lorry had just finished his dinner, and was sitting before a cheery little log or two of fire, perhaps looking into their blaze for the picture of that elderly gentleman from Tellson's, who had looked into the red coals at the Royal George at Dover, now a good many years ago. He turned his head as they entered, and showed the surprise in which he saw a stranger. "Miss Pross's brother, sir," said Sidney, "Mr. Barsad." "Barsad?" repeated the old gentleman. "Barsad? I have an association with that name." "And with the face." "I told you had a remarkable face, Mr. Barsad," observed Carton coolly. "Pray sit down." As he took a chair himself, he supplied the link that Mr. Lorry wanted by saying to him with a frown, "Witness at the trial." Mr. Lorry immediately remembered and regarded his new visitor with an undisguised look of abhorrence. "Mr. Barsad has been recognized by Miss Pross as the affectionate brother you have heard of," said Sidney, "and has acknowledged the relationship. I pass to worse news. Darnay has been arrested again." Struck with consternation, the old gentleman exclaimed, "What do you tell me? I left him safe and free within these 2 hours, and am about to return to him." "Arrested for all that. When was it done, Mr. Barsad?" "Just now, if at all." "Mr. Barsad is the best authority possible, sir," said Sidney, "and I have it from Mr. Barsad's communication to a friend in Brother Sheep over a bottle of wine that the arrest has taken place. He left the messengers at the gate and saw them admitted by the porter. There is no earthly doubt that he is retaken." Mr. Lorry's business eye read in the speaker's face that this was a loss of time to dwell upon the point. Confused, but sensible that something might depend on his presence of mind, he commanded himself and was silently attentive. "Now I trust," said Sidney to him, "that the name and influence of Dr. Manette may stand him in a good stead tomorrow. You said he would be before the tribunal again tomorrow, Mr. Barsad?" "Yes, I believe so." "In as good stead tomorrow as today, but it may not be so. I own to you I am shaken, Mr. Lorry, by Dr. Manette's not having had the power to prevent his arrest." So here Darnay is really kind of preparing for the worst situation here. He says that he thinks that Manette may be able to get him out of the situation again, but he says, "I'm worried that Dr. Manette didn't know about the future arrest and that he was unable to stop it." So there's some extra concern in this imprisonment that wasn't quite there once Dr. Manette came to France the first time. "He may not have known beforehand," said Mr. Lorry, "but that very circumstance would be alarming when we remember how identified he is with his son-in-law." "That's true," Mr. Lorry acknowledged, with his troubled hand at his chin and his troubled eye on Carton. "In short," said Sidney, this is a desperate time, when desperate games are played for desperate stakes. Let the doctor play the winning game. I will play the losing one." So he says, let Dr. Manette play it the way that he has, and hopefully everything will work out. Charles will be released again. All will be well. "But for my part, Sidney Carton, I am going to prepare for the worst case scenario." Picking up with No Man's Life, no man's life here is worth purchase. Anyone carried home by the people today may be condemned tomorrow. Now the stake I have resolved to play for, in case of the worst, is a friend in the conciergerie, and that friend I propose to myself to win is Mr. Barsad. "You need have good cards, sir," said the spy. So here we get the title of the chapter, A Hand at Cards. So Carton is trying to figure out how he can use Barsad in this.